What if I told you that one of Memphis's most beloved rappers was allegedly running a street operation so dangerous that federal authorities were building a case against him before he was gunned down in broad daylight? Young Dolph wasn't just the independent king of Memphis rap. According to court documents and street sources, he was allegedly orchestrating hits on rival rappers while dodging bullets himself in one of hip-hop's most violent feuds. Today, we're diving deep into the untold story of why the feds were circling young Dolph, the deadly chess game he was playing with Yo Gotti, and how his alleged street moves may have sealed his fate. From attempted assassinations to federal investigations, this is the story they don't want you to hear. Stay until the end, because what I'm about to reveal about Dolph's final days will change everything you thought you knew about his murder. Let's start with something most people don't know. Young Dolph wasn't just a victim in this Memphis street war. According to multiple sources and court testimony, he was allegedly an active participant who may have fired the first shots in what would become one of rap's deadliest beefs. The story begins in 2015 at Club Label in Charlotte during the CIAA weekend takeover. This wasn't just any party. We're talking about a star-studded event featuring T.I., Young Jeezy, and Yo Gotti. But what happened that night would spark a war that's still claiming lives today. Former Young Jeezy affiliate Clem was there that night, and his first-hand account paints a picture that completely flips the narrative. According to Clem, while everyone assumed Yo Gotti's crew started the violence, it was actually Dolph's people who made the first move. Clem describes seeing orange ski masks, Dolph's signature look at the time, creeping through the VIP section. These weren't random partygoers. These were Dolph's shooters moving with purpose. "We just see these orange ski masks just creeping through VIP," Clem recalled. "And then they got up to where Gotti and them was, and all we know, we just heard gunshots, and I think they had shot Gotti, brother Keon." That's right. According to this eyewitness account, young Dolph's crew shot Howard Wright, Yo Gotti's right-hand man, and CMG's vice president. This wasn't self-defense or retaliation. This was allegedly a calculated hit that Dolph's people carried out in a crowded nightclub. But here's where it gets really interesting. The mainstream narrative always painted Dolph as the victim who was constantly under attack. Court documents and street sources tell a different story. According to testimony from Hernandez Govern, the alleged mastermind behind Dolph's murder, there were serious allegations that Dolph had put a bounty on Yo Gotti's head. During his No Jumper interview, Govern revealed that he was approached with information that Dolph trying to kill Gotti. When this was brought to Big Jook's attention, instead of dismissing it as street rumors, Jook allegedly confirmed that Gotti's truck had indeed been shot at. The bulletproof plating had saved Gotti's life, but according to Govern, Dolph had been bragging on the drill that he sent some people to get over with Gotti. Think about that for a second. While the public saw young Dolph as the independent artist who refused to bow down to industry politics, behind the scenes he was allegedly orchestrating assassination attempts on one of Memphis's biggest rappers. This wasn't just rap beef. This was attempted murder. The federal authorities were paying attention. When you have rappers putting hits on each other, using stolen vehicles, and coordinating shootings across state lines, that's when the feds start building RICO cases. And according to multiple sources, they were building one around young Dolph's operation. But let's back up and understand how this beef really started, because the Charlotte shooting was just the beginning of a war that would consume Memphis for years. The tension between Dolph and Gotti goes back to 2014 when Gotti tried to sign Dolph to CMG. This wasn't just a business offer. It was Gotti recognizing Dolph's talent and wanting to bring him into the fold. But Dolph turned him down, and not quietly. He made it clear that he didn't need Gotti's help and could build his own empire. That rejection stung, but what really escalated things was Dolph's decision to get personal. He started rapping about sleeping with the mother of Gotti's child, turning what could have been a business disagreement into a deeply personal attack. In hip-hop, you can diss someone's music, their money, even their street credibility. But when you start talking about a man's family, that's when things turn deadly. Dolph doubled down on this strategy repeatedly. On tracks like Scared of Me and later Play With Yo Beat You, he wasn't just claiming to have been intimate with Gotti's baby mama, he was bragging about it in detail. He rapped about staying in hotels with her for weeks, doing the unthinkable day after day for a month straight, and even ended bars with facts just to drive home that this wasn't just rap braggadocio. This psychological warfare was calculated and cruel. Dolph knew exactly what buttons to push, and he pushed them repeatedly. But what he may not have realized was that he was painting a target on his back that would eventually prove fatal. The violence escalated quickly after the Charlotte incident. In February 2016, just days after Dolph released his King of Memphis album, a title that directly challenged Gotti's claim to the throne, someone let off over 40 shots at Dolph's entourage at a Charlotte hotel. 3 suspects were arrested, including Howard Wright, the same man who had been shot at Club Label the year before. But this was just the beginning. The pattern that emerged was clear. Dolph would release a diss track or make inflammatory statements, and within days or weeks, bullets would fly. In March 2016, after Dolph dropped the Play Wit Yo B Dowers music video, which featured a Gotti lookalike getting disrespected, someone tried to kill him with over 100 rounds in Charlotte. Here's what's crazy about that Charlotte shooting. Dolph survived because he had invested $600,000 in bulletproofing his Cadillac Escalade. That's not the move of someone who's just making music. That's the move of someone who knows he's in a war and is preparing for battle. And Dolph's response to nearly being killed? He went on stage that same night and performed the very diss track that may have triggered the attempt on his life. Then he turned the whole incident into a marketing opportunity, releasing an album called Bulletproof with track titles that spelled out a message to his enemies. 100 shots in Charlotte, but I'm bulletproof, so fuck 'em. The feds were watching all of this. When you have rappers getting shot at across state lines using bulletproof vehicles and turning assassination attempts into album concepts, that raises red flags. Federal investigators started building timelines, tracking movements, and connecting dots between the music and the violence. But the most damning evidence of Dolph's alleged involvement in street activities came from his own lyrics. On the track, That's How I Feel, he rapped about hearing that someone had paid $100,000 for his head, then bragged about getting his money back. During the trial of his alleged killers, it was revealed that $100,000 was indeed the exact bounty placed on his head. How did Dolph know the specific amount unless he was deeply connected to the streets? The federal authorities have sophisticated methods for tracking these kinds of operations. They use wiretaps, financial surveillance, and informants to build cases against criminal organizations. When Dolph started rapping about specific dollar amounts for hits, the feds took notice. They began analyzing his lyrics like evidence, looking for admissions of criminal activity. The pattern continued in 2017, when Dolph was shot in Los Angeles. According to police reports, he got into an argument with 3 men at the Loews Hollywood Hotel, which escalated into a physical confrontation. When Dolph was knocked to the ground, one of the men pulled out a gun and shot him multiple times. Again, a man named Corey McClendon, described as a known associate of Yo Gotti, was arrested in connection with the shooting. But like so many other incidents in this beef, the charges were eventually dropped due to lack of evidence and Dolph's refusal to cooperate with police. This non-cooperation with law enforcement is significant. In federal investigations, when victims consistently refuse to work with police, it often indicates they're involved in activities they don't want scrutinized. The feds were taking notes on every incident, every arrest, and every time Dolph chose the streets over the courtroom. The federal authorities understand that when someone repeatedly refuses to cooperate with investigations into attempts on their own life, it's usually because they're afraid of what else might come to light. Dolph's consistent refusal to work with police wasn't just about street credibility, it was about protecting himself from federal scrutiny. Meanwhile, Dolph was expanding his paper route empire and signing artists who came with their own street affiliations. When he signed Key Glock in 2017, he wasn't just getting a talented rapper, he was inheriting Glock's connections to crews like Goon Squad Mafia and OG Lump Gang. These weren't just rap groups, they were street organizations with real beef and real bodies. The federal authorities understand how these networks operate. When you sign street rappers to your label, you're not just their boss, you become responsible for their actions and connected to their conflicts. Every shooting, every retaliation, every street move your artists make reflects back on you as the label head. Key Glock's background was particularly concerning from a federal perspective. He had connections to multiple Memphis street crews, including some that were actively involved in ongoing conflicts. When the feds started mapping out the relationships between different gangs and crews, they found that Paper Route Empire was at the center of a complex web of street affiliations. And Dolph's artists were active. Paper Route Wu, one of his signees, was involved in multiple shootouts. According to court testimony, there were attempts on his life that were directly connected to the Dolph Gotti beef. When your artists are getting shot at because of your beef, that makes you a target for federal conspiracy charges. The attempted hit on Paper Route Wu is particularly significant because it shows how the violence was spreading beyond just Dolph and Gotti. According to court testimony from Cornelius Smith, Hernandez Govern had provided him with a weapon for an earlier attempt on Wu's life. The gun jammed during the shootout, but the intent was clear. This was part of a coordinated campaign to eliminate Paper Route Empire artists. The feds were also watching Dolph's business operations. Paper Route Empire was generating millions in revenue, but questions remained about how much of that money was clean. When you're moving large amounts of cash, buying bulletproof vehicles, and your artists are involved in shootings, federal investigators start looking at money laundering and racketeering charges. Federal financial investigators have sophisticated tools for tracking money flows in criminal organizations. They look at cash transactions, unusual banking patterns, and discrepancies between reported income and lifestyle. Dolph's operation was generating red flags across multiple categories. The purchase of the bulletproof vehicle alone would have triggered federal interest. When someone spends $600,000 to armor a car, the feds want to know where that money came from and why someone feels they need that level of protection. Combined with the multiple shooting incidents, it painted a picture of someone involved in serious criminal activity. But here's where Dolph may have made his biggest mistake. He allegedly started putting hits on other people. According to multiple sources, including court testimony, Dolph wasn't just defending himself, he was actively trying to eliminate his enemies. The allegations about Dolph ordering a hit on Yo Gotti are particularly serious because they came from multiple sources. Hernandez Govern testified that he was told Dolph was trying to kill Gotti. When this information was brought to Big Jook's attention, instead of laughing it off, he allegedly confirmed that there had indeed been an attempt on his brother's life. According to Govern's account, Big Jook revealed that Gotti's Rolls-Royce had been shot at, but the bulletproof plating had saved his life. More damning, Jook allegedly said that Dolph had been bragging on the drill, street terminology for boasting about ordering a hit. The federal authorities have extensive experience with these types of cases. When they hear about rappers ordering hits on each other, they immediately start building conspiracy cases. The fact that multiple sources were reporting the same information about Dolph ordering a hit on Gotti would have been enough to open a federal investigation. If these allegations are true, they paint a picture of young Dolph as someone who had crossed the line from rap beef into attempted murder. And when you're ordering hits on other rappers, you're not just a musician anymore. You're running a criminal organization. The federal authorities have a playbook for these situations. They start with the violence, then work backward to build conspiracy cases. They look at phone records, financial transactions, and witness testimony to prove that what looks like random street beef is actually an organized criminal enterprise. The feds would have been particularly interested in the coordination aspect of these alleged hits. When you have multiple people working together to plan and execute assassination attempts, that's conspiracy. When money changes hands to pay for these hits, that's racketeering. When the violence crosses state lines, it becomes a federal matter, and Dolph was giving them plenty to work with. His lyrics were essentially confessions. His business operations raised questions about money laundering. His artists were involved in shootings. His enemies were getting shot at. From a federal perspective, Paper Route Empire was starting to look less like a record label and more like a criminal organization. The federal authorities also would have been tracking the escalating nature of the violence. What started as a business dispute had evolved into attempted murders, and the body count was rising. When street beefs reach this level of violence, the feds step in to prevent further bloodshed. But there's another angle to this story that most people don't understand. The federal authorities were also concerned about the influence these conflicts were having on Memphis's youth. When successful rappers are involved in street wars, it sends a message to young people that violence is the way to solve problems. The Memphis Police Department had been documenting a rise in youth violence that seemed to correlate with the escalating beef between Dolph and Gotti. Young people were choosing sides, repping different crews, and getting involved in conflicts they didn't fully understand. From a federal perspective, this was a public safety crisis that needed to be addressed. The feds were also tracking how the beef was affecting the broader Memphis rap scene. Other artists were being forced to choose sides, and some were getting caught in the crossfire. When your local music scene becomes a war zone, that's when federal authorities start treating it as an organized crime problem. But before the feds could make their move, the streets got to Dolph first. On November 17, 2021, young Dolph walked into Makita's Cookies in Memphis to buy treats for his mother. It was supposed to be a simple stop during his annual Thanksgiving turkey drive. Instead, it became the scene of one of hip-hop's most shocking assassinations. Two masked gunmen, later identified as Justin "Straight Drop" Johnson and Cornelius Smith, ambushed Dolph in broad daylight. They fired over 20 shots, hitting him 22 times in the head, chest, and back. Dolph's brother Marcus, who was with him, returned fire and hit both shooters, but it was too late. Young Dolph was dead at 36 years old. The assassination was professional and calculated. The shooters had been tracking Paper Route Empire artists for months, waiting for the right opportunity. They used a stolen white Mercedes-Benz and had escape routes planned. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was a coordinated hit. The level of planning involved in Dolph's murder immediately caught federal attention. This wasn't a spontaneous shooting. It was a carefully orchestrated assassination that involved multiple people, stolen vehicles, and extensive surveillance of the target. From a federal perspective, this looked like organized crime. During the trial of his alleged killers, the full scope of the conspiracy was revealed. According to testimony from Cornelius Smith, Big Jook had placed a $100,000 bounty on Dolph's head. The hit was allegedly coordinated by Hernandez Govern, who had connections to both the shooters and CMG. But here's what's really chilling. Smith testified that there were bounties on multiple paper route empire artists. This wasn't just about killing Dolph, it was about dismantling his entire organization. From a federal perspective, this looked like a racketeering conspiracy involving multiple murders and attempted murders. The testimony revealed that the shooters had been actively hunting paper route empire artists for months before they finally caught Dolph. They had attempted hits on other artists, conducted surveillance, and were working from a list of targets. This level of organization is exactly what federal authorities look for when building RICO cases. The fact that there were bounties on multiple artists also suggests that this was more than just a personal beef between Dolph and Gotti. This was allegedly a systematic campaign to eliminate an entire organization, which is the definition of racketeering, and the aftermath of Dolph's murder unleashed a wave of violence that's still claiming lives today. What followed became known as the Slide for Dolph campaign, a series of retaliatory killings that turned Memphis into a war zone. The first casualty was D-Money, a Memphis comedian who made insensitive comments about Dolph's death on social media. 6 days after Dolph was killed, D-Money was gunned down at a gas station in North Memphis. His murder sent a clear message: disrespect Dolph's memory and face the consequences. D-Money's murder was particularly significant because it showed how quickly the retaliation began. Within a week of Dolph's death, people were already being killed for perceived disrespect. This rapid escalation is exactly what federal authorities fear when organized crime conflicts spill into the streets. But the real war was just beginning. In January 2022, Big Jook, a KSBG rapper who had childhood connections to Straight Drop, was killed in the parking lot of his apartment complex. Online, his murder was labeled as another case of Memphis sliding for Dolph, but the reality was more complex. Jook was caught in the middle of overlapping beefs that had been simmering for years. Jook's murder illustrates how these street conflicts create a web of violence that extends far beyond the original participants. He was killed not because of anything he did to Dolph, but because of his association with one of Dolph's alleged killers. This guilt by association mentality is what makes these conflicts so dangerous and why the feds treat them as organized crime. The violence escalated throughout 2022 and 2023. Cheese Dollar, another KSBG rapper, was killed in a McDonald's parking lot by alleged young mob members Muhammad Samba and Quentin Moss. The level of planning involved in this murder, tracking the victim to a specific location and executing him in broad daylight, again showed the organized nature of the violence. Big Grape was gunned down at a gas station in what appeared to be another targeted hit. Junior Splat, just 15 years old, was killed in his own home, showing that even children weren't safe from this war. Each murder was connected to the web of alliances and rivalries that Dolph's death had set in motion. The murder of Junior Splat was particularly troubling because it showed how the violence was affecting Memphis's youth. A 15-year-old boy was killed because of gang affiliations and street politics he may not have fully understood. This is exactly the kind of collateral damage that prompts federal intervention. But the most shocking retaliation came in January 2024, when Big Jook, Yo Gotti's brother and the alleged mastermind behind Dolph's murder, was assassinated outside a restaurant in Memphis. Jook had just attended their uncle's funeral when gunmen opened fire, killing him instantly. The murder of Big Jook was seen as the ultimate revenge for Dolph's death. According to street sources, it was a coordinated hit carried out by people loyal to Dolph's memory. The message was clear: you can kill the king, but the kingdom will strike back. The assassination of Big Jook was particularly significant because it showed that even high-level figures weren't safe from retaliation. Jook was Yo Gotti's brother and a successful businessman in his own right, but his alleged involvement in Dolph's murder made him a target. This level of violence against prominent figures is what prompts federal task forces. The federal authorities watched all of this unfold with growing concern. What started as a rap beef had evolved into a full-scale gang war that was claiming lives across Memphis. Young Mob, KSBG, Truler Mafia, Double R, all of these crews were connected to either Dolph or Gotti, and they were killing each other in the streets. The feds began to see a pattern that extended far beyond individual murders. They were looking at a network of criminal organizations that were using violence to settle disputes and eliminate rivals. This is exactly the type of activity that RICO laws were designed to address. In July 2024, the feds finally made their move. They indicted 15 people on drug trafficking and firearm charges, including Stupid Duke, the leader of Young Mob and one of Dolph's closest allies. The indictment revealed the scope of the criminal organization that had been operating under the cover of the Memphis rap scene. The federal indictment was significant because it showed how the authorities viewed these rap-related conflicts. They weren't seeing isolated incidents of violence. They were seeing organized criminal enterprises that used music as a front for illegal activities. But this was just the beginning. In July 2025, the feds upgraded their charges to RICO, alleging that Young Mob was a criminal organization responsible for multiple murders, drug trafficking, and racketeering. The indictment painted a picture of a gang that used violence to maintain control and eliminate rivals. The RICO charges are significant because they show how the feds view these rap-related conflicts. They're not just seeing isolated incidents of violence. They're seeing organized criminal enterprises that use music as a front for illegal activities. The 91-page affidavit that accompanied the Young Mob indictment revealed the extent of federal surveillance. The feds had been monitoring phone calls, tracking financial transactions, and using informants to build their case. They had evidence of trafficking, weapons violations, and multiple murders. One particularly damning piece of evidence was a recorded phone call where Stupid Duke allegedly gave permission for his crew to attack members of Pooh Shiesty's chopper gang. The casual nature of the conversation, discussing potential murders like everyday business, showed the organized nature of the violence. And here's the thing that should terrify every rapper involved in street activities. The feds were building similar cases around other Memphis crews. Fast Cash Boys, KSBG, Truler Mafia, all of these groups had members who were involved in the violence that followed Dolph's death. The federal authorities were watching, documenting, and preparing to bring down the entire network. If young Dolph had lived, there's a strong possibility he would have been caught up in these federal cases. His alleged involvement in ordering hits, his connections to violent street crews, and his refusal to cooperate with law enforcement had put him squarely in the feds' crosshairs. The evidence suggests that Dolph was running more than just a record label. According to court documents and street sources, Paper Route Empire was allegedly the front for a criminal organization that was involved in trafficking, money laundering, and ordering hits on rivals. The feds have a pattern when dealing with these cases. They start by targeting the foot soldiers, the shooters and drug dealers. Then they work their way up to the organizers and financiers. Finally, they go after the leaders who are giving the orders and benefiting from the criminal activity. Dolph would have been at the top of that pyramid. As the head of Paper Route Empire, he would have been held responsible for the actions of his artists and associates. Every shooting, every drug deal, every act of violence committed by someone connected to his label could have been used to build a conspiracy case against him. The federal authorities understand that modern rap labels often function as criminal organizations. They use the music industry to launder money, recruit new members, and coordinate illegal activities. When your artists are getting arrested for murders and your beef is claiming lives across multiple states, you're not just a record executive anymore. You're the head of a criminal enterprise. The feds have successfully used RICO laws against other rap-related organizations. They brought down BMF, which had connections to multiple rap artists. They've targeted other labels that were fronts for criminal activity. The precedent is clear. When rap labels cross the line into organized crime, the federal authorities will treat them as such. And the evidence against Dolph was mounting. His lyrics contained detailed confessions about street activities. His business operations raised questions about the source of his wealth. His enemies were getting shot at, and his allies were committing murders. From a federal perspective, he was the perfect target for a RICO case. The federal authorities also would have been interested in Dolph's financial operations. Paper Route Empire was generating millions in revenue, but the sources of that income would have been scrutinized. When you're buying bulletproof vehicles and your artists are involved in shootings, the feds want to know where the money is coming from. but the streets got to him first, and his death unleashed a wave of violence that's still claiming lives today. The Slide for Dolph campaign has resulted in dozens of murders, federal indictments, and the destruction of multiple rap careers. The tragedy is that none of this had to happen. If Dolph had chosen to stay out of the streets and focus on his music, he might still be alive today. If he had cooperated with law enforcement instead of handling things himself, the feds might have protected him instead of investigating him, but that's not how the streets work, and it's not how Dolph operated. He chose to play a dangerous game, and ultimately, that game cost him his life. The federal authorities are still building cases around the violence that followed Dolph's death. More indictments are coming, more rappers will be arrested, and more lives will be destroyed. The Memphis rap scene that produced legends like 3 6 Mafia and Yo Gotti is now synonymous with violence and federal investigations. The ongoing federal investigations have already claimed multiple careers. Rappers who were once rising stars are now facing decades in federal prison. The Memphis rap scene has been decimated by arrests, murders, and federal scrutiny. Young Dolph's legacy is complicated. He was undeniably talented, fiercely independent, and beloved by his fans, but he was also allegedly involved in activities that put him on the federal radar and ultimately led to his death. The question isn't whether Dolph deserved to die. Nobody deserves to be gunned down in broad daylight. The question is whether he understood the consequences of the game he was playing and whether he could have made different choices that would have kept him alive. The feds wanted young Dolph locked up because they saw him as the head of a criminal organization that was using music as a front for illegal activities. They were building a case that could have put him away for decades. But before they could make their move, the streets delivered their own form of justice. And now, Memphis is paying the price. The violence that followed Dolph's death has claimed dozens of lives and destroyed countless families. The federal investigations have torn apart the rap scene and sent multiple artists to prison. The city that gave birth to the blues and rock and roll is now known for gang wars and federal indictments. This is the real story of why the feds wanted young Dolph locked up. It's not just about one rapper's beef with another, it's about how the music industry can become a front for criminal organizations, how rap beefs can escalate into gang wars, and how the federal authorities respond when the violence spills over into multiple states and claims multiple lives. The federal authorities have made it clear that they will not tolerate organized criminal activity, regardless of whether it's connected to the music industry. The RICO laws give them powerful tools to dismantle criminal organizations, and they're not afraid to use them. Young Dolph's death was a tragedy, but it was also the inevitable result of choices he made and games he chose to play. The feds were watching, the streets were waiting, and ultimately, both got what they wanted. The only question now is how many more lives will be lost before this war finally ends. The Memphis rap scene may never recover from the damage that's been done. Too many talented artists are dead or in prison. Too many families have been destroyed. Too many young people have been influenced by the violence and chaos. But perhaps there's a lesson in all of this. Perhaps the next generation of rappers will see what happened to young Dolph and make different choices. Perhaps they'll choose music over the streets, cooperation over confrontation, and life over death. If you've made it this far, you understand that this story is bigger than just young Dolph or Yo Gotti. This is about how the federal authorities view the modern rap industry and why they're increasingly treating rap labels as criminal organizations. Drop a comment and let me know what you think about these federal investigations and whether you believe rappers should face RICO charges for their street activities. And if you want to see more deep dives into the intersection of hip-hop and federal law enforcement, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Until next time, stay safe out there.